Welcome, fantasy hockey enthusiasts, to the heart of the frozen realm, where dreams are forged and legends are born. I am your guide through the icy expanse, the storyteller of triumphs and tribulations. This is the Stick and Puck Week 17 recap. As we lace up our metaphorical skates and dive headfirst into the pixelated arenas of our collective imagination, prepare for a journey that will leave you breathless, on the edge of your seat, and yearning for more. This week's recap is brought to you by Ridley Gregg's Clap Bomb. And now, on to the recap. Starting with Egg United versus Team 1. It was Team 1 losing to Egg United 75.6 to 72.7. A close one. Team 1 drops to 12-5, while Egg United gets up above 500, going to 9-8. For Egg, Ovechkin finally pops off, scoring a goal in each of his 4 games this week, with a clutch goal on the final day of Week 17. Not a strong week from either goaltender, however, for Egg, as Saros and Skinner combined for negative 2.4 fantasy points. Speaking of goaltending, it was a rough week for Team 1's goaltender Ingram. Negative 8 fantasy point performance. And a slow 4-game week for the Colorado crew of Team 1, helping out Egg. Lykinen and McKinnon combine for just 8.5 fantasy points. If we go to the graph, we can see that Team 1 got off to a lead. Egg United was giving up hope. But then, and remember there's an all-star break at some point in here, on day 6, day 7, and day 8, Egg United comes back. Team 1 has a strong push on the final 2 days, but not quite enough. Egg United with the victory. You can see Team 1 was ahead, but then on that day, days between day 6 and 7, day 6, Egg United crossed over into the lead, stayed there until the end of the week. Our next matchup is Lenny's Legends, now the Love Letters during Valentine's week, versus Staying Alive. Staying Alive, as you know, was on a big hot streak, but that streak came to an end. They are now 6-11, losing to the Legends 92.3 to 76.6. Lenny's Legends are now 14-3. It was a solid base level production all around for the Legends. Only Tuck scores less than 3 fantasy points this week. Makar steps up for the Avalanche. Despite a bad week for the team, he has 8.4 fantasy points. Is Hyman slowing down? You remember Ovechkin had a big week, but the other player in that trade, Hyman, recorded just 2.9 fantasy points this week. Will he return to form down the stretch? Staying Alive is hoping so. Staying Alive got a strong defensive week from Tanev, who recorded 14 block shots that made up 7 of his 8.4 fantasy points on the week. If we go to the graph, we see that it was back and forth here first couple of days. Then the Legends get out to a lead, a very even day 5, and then a big day 7, and they hold on to the victory. It was close the last 3 days. You see they get off to the lead, and they keep that lead all the way through. Next up, we have the Danglers versus the Forest Hills Flames, and the Flames were on fire this week, recording 111.9 points. They were the highest point getters of the week. They win the matchup. Doketown Danglers, 94.3 points. The Flames are now 5-12, while the Doketown Danglers are 7-9-1. A monstrous week in net for the Flames. Hill and Ottinger shut it down with a stellar 27 fantasy points combined in net with no shutouts. Suzuki shines with 4 goals for the Les Canadiens, contributing an impressive 11.9 fantasy point performance. Tough scheduling. Seems like a lot of bad luck for the Danglers. No 4-game weeks. 4 players forced to run with just 2 games. However, on the bright side, it was a good week for Giroux and McDavid, totaling 14.1 fantasy points combined. And that was better than Makar and Pasta. So this week, they got the better of the big blockbuster trade. Really, on the graph, day 5 tells the story. Look at this. The Danglers get about 12 points, while the Flames get about 47. So you can see that over here. This huge jump up to almost 60 points. And then they cruise to the big victory in week number 17. Who is up next? It is still Skill Stick Fail versus How Is This Happening? How Is This Happening has been on autopilot for the last number of weeks, but that was good enough for the win, 83.4 to 73.2. They're now above 500 again, 9-8, while Skill Stick Fail is 4-13. I believe that's, well, we'll look at the standings later on. For Hith, interesting box score includes 0 goalie performances. I know Reimer is one of the goalies. I forget who's the other, but they had no starts, no minutes this week. Tavares records his second best performance of the year, 11 fantasy points, while Skill Stick Fail, some of the worst performances of the week on this team. Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen both score 0.7 fantasy points. Enormous week for Toronto players, apparently. Marner is no exception, scoring a grand total of 8.1 fantasy points. I'd call that good, not enormous, to be honest. But looking at the graphs, we have How Is This Happening in the teal. These are confusing colors, both greenish. But it's kind of back and forth here, as you can see. But then day 6, How Is This Happening? They start off with the lead. They, in the next couple of days, really get a good grasp on that lead. And by the time Saturday rolls around, it's just too much for Skill Stick to overcome. Tavares is the MVP. I forgot to mention the other MVPs. Let's go back and just appreciate the MVP-ness of these previously skipped over players. The team MVP for Egg United was Ovechkin with 13.1 fantasy points. He broke the record for career empty net goals. Then Lenny's MVP was Roman Josi with 9.8 fantasy points. Jay Gottinger was the Flames MVP with 15 fantasy points. And as mentioned, Tavares, the MVP for How Is This Happening? Our next matchup is Slay All Day versus Los Mustachios de Austin. The Mustachios were the winners, 108.9 to 92.1. The Mustachios go to 10-7, and Slay All Day drops to 8-1. Surprising perhaps to see Gerard as the MVP with 11.9 fantasy points, considering some of the other Avalanche players were struggling in Week 17. Weegar has an absurd game against the Islanders, a rare hat trick from a defenseman, 7.1 fantasy points in that one game alone for a total of 10.8. Moran household see absurd goaltending all around. Slay nets 28.6 fantasy points. And on the negative side, nightmare performance from Nuge. Just 0.7 fantasy points as the Oilers finally see their record-setting or breaking streak end. The graph here, not much was happening in the first few days prior to the All-Star break, but then Slay All Day jumped out to a lead. I believe that's shown here. A bit of a lead, but then the Mustachios come back and retain that lead for the remainder of the matchup. It was just a little bit, except for this day here, day number 8, just a little bit more on each day. So it was the Mustachios with the win, as mentioned. Gerard with the MVP performance, 11.9 fantasy points. All right, league-wide points. The long week rendered the graph out of order. Nothing for magnifying glass nerd to look at, so we're going to go to a screenshot of the ESPN Fantasy Hockey website. This is not... None of these columns are selected, so it's all out of order and very difficult for me to see. But if you look at what this slide is supposed to be showing us, it is the total points for column. And you can see that Lenny's Love Letters, aka the Legends, is still up on top. Now, if they would have selected this column, it would be in the proper order, because Team 1 is no longer second in points for. It's either the Mustachios. Let me look over here to the larger view. Mustachios and the Danglers actually have more points now than Team 1. So it goes Lenny's Legends, then the Mustachios, then the Danglers, only like 1 point between each of them, and then another 2 points down to Team 1. And then it's Egg United, I believe. But anyways, this slide was not well put together. But if you want to look at some of the other stats, right now the Legends are the hottest team, winners of 5 games in a row, while the coldest team is now the Danglers, one of the unluckiest teams, if not the unluckiest, second most or third most points, but losing 3 in a row. As mentioned before, Staying Alive streak was broken. Second hottest team with 2 wins in a row is actually the Flames, surprisingly. And Skill Stick Fail has 2 losses in a row. Other than that, everyone has lost one game in a row, which really isn't in a row. So not a lot of streaks here. Next up is our marquee matchups, everyone's favorite time in the recap. Let's go from the bottom to the top. An interesting matchup here, Battle of the AV Crew. Staying Alive versus... Maybe I shouldn't have clicked on that. Let's go back to the marquee matchups. Slay All Day versus Staying Alive. Interesting playoff implications as well. Next up, Skill Stick Fail versus the Mustachios. Not much interest in this one. Next, you have How Is This Happening versus the Doketown Danglers. How is this happening? Coming off a big win that puts them right back in the playoff race, while the Danglers, as mentioned, have lost 3 in a row. Again, playoff implications big time in this one. This is also a consideration in the marquee matchup. Also, you have the Flames versus Egg United. Flames, winners of 2 in a row. Egg United, solidifying their playoff position. Another interesting matchup, perhaps. And then you got the top matchup. You have the top 2 teams squaring off. Team 1 versus Lenny's Legends. You might expect this one to be the marquee matchup. However, there aren't really any playoff implications except other than, I guess, the overall top seed. So you could say the marquee matchup is this matchup. Obviously, this is the matchup perhaps if these matchups were on network television. This would be the one, the top billing. But let's say this is matchup number one, marquee number one, and then two matchups are in the B position, lower billing, but still on the promo. How is this happening versus the Danglers and Staying Alive versus Slay All Day? Those two matchups have playoff implications just seeping out of them. So dense, and I can't think of any more metaphors. But anyway, lots of playoff implications in those two matchups. Playoff picture. We mentioned the playoff picture. Let's look at it a little more closely. Again, Team 1 remains atop the Prince of Wales division, 12-5. 2 games up on the Mustachios. The Mustachios were winners while Team 1 lost their matchup. So both have 99 and 98 playoff percentages respectively. They seem pretty safe. But the Mustachios would like to get into that top spot where they would get a first round bye in the first round of the playoffs. How is this happening? Gotta win. They needed it. Losing several in a row. Now their playoff picture is much brighter. They are 3 games back. Staying Alive had been on a roll, but now things just got a whole lot more difficult. Only 6% playoff chance. 6-11, 6 games back. The Flames, winners of the last 2, are 7 back with a record of 5-12. I'm blocking the Clarence Campbell last few columns, but in this division, the Legends are atop the division 14-3. Egg United, they won a game. They're not a matchup. They're 9-8, 5 games back. Really, if you look at here, we have the first team that has clinched a playoff position. That X means that spot is guaranteed in the playoffs for the Legends. So Egg United probably not trying to get top spot 5 weeks back. They're just trying to get in second and be the home team, if that means anything, in the first round of the playoffs. Slay All Day, they lost. They're now 500, 8-1, 5.5 games back, 74% chance of the playoffs. Egg United has a 90% chance of the playoffs now. The Danglers dropped another one. They're 7-9, 6.5 games back. They have a 51% chance of making the playoffs. They got to pick off one of these teams, while Staying Alive is on their heels as well, but they need to catch either, it looks like, Slay All Day or How Is This Happening? And then finally, Skill Stick Fail, 4-13, last in the division, 1% chance of playoffs, as well as the Flames having 1% chance of the playoffs. They're 10 games back. So that is your playoff picture, suggested by one of our viewers. And finally, I was going to say something that I forgot, but actually I didn't forget it. So we'll continue on. Predictions. All right. Once again, I have to predict my own team. It'll be a tough matchup. We don't expect Team 1 to struggle as they did last week. They've already beaten the Legends once this year. And so the Legends would like to beat Team 1 at least once this year. So this is the marquee matchup. And again, we're going with the Legends. That's worked out pretty well for us. We're 14-3 picking the Legends. We're going with the Legends this week against Team 1. Flames versus United. Well, the Flames are coming off an incredible performance. Is that the start of a trend, or was that just an anomaly? Egg United coming off a win, though it was a struggle. The points weren't too high. We're going to go with Egg United. Next up, and I don't know if anyone's keeping track of my predictions, how is this happening versus the Danglers? Again, a team that's struggling. The Danglers, losers of, I think, 2 or 3, I forget which one it was, in a row. How is this happening? 1-1. I think perhaps that was just one lucky week for how is this happening. I'm going to have to go with the Danglers to turn perhaps their season around and perhaps get on a run of good luck. Mustachios versus Skill Stick Fail, one of the top teams versus the team in last overall position. We're going to have to go with the Mustachios. And finally, Staying Alive versus Slay All Day. This is a hard one to predict. Staying Alive, after so many great weeks, really struggled in week number 17. Slay All Day did quite well, though they did not end up winning their matchup, but their point total was somewhat impressive. This really is causing a lot of extra brain cells to be deployed at this moment. We're going to go with it's a toss-up. What will I say? I will say it will be, thinking of the goaltenders, who do they have? I'm going to go with, I know Jack Hughes is back, I believe. There was announcements about that, I believe. We're going to go with, and thinking that they actually did change their name to a Valentine's theme name, we're going with Slayentine's Day to get the big win in week number 18. So that does it. That's your week 17 recap, brought to you by Mr. Greg's big slap shot empty net goal. Secondary sponsor, Morgan Riley Suspension. And we'll see you in week number or after week number 18. Good luck, everyone.